Welcome back to our channel. Leslie left behind a suicide note, a piece of paper with trembling handwriting, like a cold cut into the hearts of those who would find it. In it, she revealed a truth that she had long hidden, that she knew Doug's dark secret, a secret enough to destroy his family, his career, and the legacy he had built with fame and power. But instead of staying to face the consequences of that revelation, Leslie disappeared, leaving a deadly void in the house that was already too full of conflicts. From the moment the letter was found, everything seemed to explode, not with gunfire or fire, but with doubt, anger, and fierce collisions in the hearts of each person involved. Doug was pushed into a nightmare with no way out. On the outside, he kept his cool, still wearing the armor of power, but inside, fear and anger were tearing at his soul. He knew the letter was more than just a false accusation. Leslie had lived long enough with him to see things others were never allowed to know. Mistakes, secret deals, actions that seemed buried deep in the years were now on the verge of being exposed. Doug's anger was not only directed at Leslie for betraying his trust, but also at himself, because he knew it was his arrogance that had caused him to let his guard down. Doug was stuck between two paths: destroy anyone who dared to follow the letter's trail or confess to control the story before it consumed him. But both choices meant loss. He resented Leslie, but her disappearance also left him with an invisible void, as if his soul had been crushed. Nicole was the first to notice something was wrong. Reading the despair-soaked words, she saw not just a goodbye, but a hidden indictment disguised as a suicide note. She was angry because she felt betrayed. How could someone like Leslie, supposed to be the emotional pillar of their relationship, choose to disappear instead of fight? Nicole felt her blood boil at the thought that she had abandoned everything to run away, that the letter was just a trigger to further family chaos. But the angrier she became, the more she realized that fear was gnawing at her. If the secret really existed, it would drag the entire Dupree bloodline into the abyss. Nicole didn't want to believe it, but the doubt was eating away at any remaining faith. During sleepless nights, she wondered if she was living in a family built on lies and darkness, if the love and protection she had received were just a mask. Her anger was not only directed at Leslie, but also spread to Doug, and anger mixed with pain, leaving her torn between family and truth. Danny fell into a different state. She felt like she was buried alive in a maze of unanswered questions. For Danny, the letter was not only evidence of betrayal, but also a sentence for the entire family. She hated Leslie for casting a shadow into her life and then disappearing, leaving her alone to bear the fear and shame. But deep down, Danny could not shake the feeling that the letter was a cry for help. This hurt her even more, because if that was the case, why didn't Leslie come to her? Why did she choose to run away? Danny began to nurture a fire of anger, not only aimed at those who had hurt her, but also aimed at herself, for her helplessness, for not being awake enough to recognize the signal before it was too late. Anita read the letter and immediately felt her world collapse. She was the one who knew Doug better than anyone, and that's why her anger flared up even more fiercely. If what Leslie wrote was true, it meant she had been living next to a husband who hid his darkness, a man who had betrayed not only his wife and children, but also the trust in his family. Anita felt humiliated, as if her life was just a cruel joke played by Doug. But Anita also hated Leslie, because she not only exposed the truth, but also left an unhealable wound for those who remained. Anita stood in the middle of an emotional volcano, wanting to tear Doug's legacy apart, and wanting to erase Leslie's existence from her memory. But that disappearance did not allow her to vent her anger, causing everything in her heart to be suppressed to the point of exploding. Vernon was torn between two extremes. He knew Doug had dangerous connections and shady decisions, but he never thought Leslie would have enough evidence to write those last lines. He was both angry and scared, because if the secret was exposed, not only Doug, but also his family, his political career and the reputation he was pursuing would be ruined. Vernon could not forgive Leslie for opening the door to the abyss, but he could not forgive Doug either, because it was his blindness and ambition that had led them to this situation. In his anger, Vernon began to think that he needed to control the situation, needed to erase all traces of the letter, needed to stop anyone from digging deeper into this secret, even if it was a family member. Leslie's disappearance became a collective nightmare. No one knows if she is alive or dead, no one knows if she left any other traces besides the suicide note. Each character feels like there is a knife hanging over their heads, ready to fall at any moment. Meals become an underground battlefield, eyes are exchanged with suspicion, no matter how gentle the words are, they are tinged with threats. They are cornered, forced to face the truth that the secret is no longer a secret, that any step can push them down the abyss. Doug gradually becomes out of control. He begins to obsess over finding Leslie, not to save her, but to silence her. In every moment, the anger inside him swells like a wild animal in captivity, wanting to rush out and tear everything apart. He imagines potential enemies lurking, imagines every look, every question containing contempt and the risk of being exposed. In that tension, he became more violent, more harsh, making those around him both afraid and hated. Nicole fell into a state of self-destruction, tormenting herself between loyalty to her father and the urge to find the truth. She could not sleep, could not trust anyone, not even those closest to her. Anger drove her into hopeless searches, digging up details from the past, and each time she found a piece of the puzzle, her anger piled up. Danny was lost in conflict, sometimes bursting with the desire to expose everything, sometimes so scared that she wanted to run away like Leslie. But the more she tried to escape, the more she felt trapped in a web of lies and betrayal. Anita gradually turned her anger into a weapon, secretly plotting how to use Doug's downfall as a springboard for herself, even if it meant destroying everything she had built with him. Vernon became increasingly cold, as if he had decided that the family was nothing more than a political tool. He saw Leslie's disappearance not as a pain, but as an opportunity to purge, to control power in his own hands. In a community full of gossip, where every small action can become news, Leslie's suicide note was not only the last word, but also the opening storm of a series of days filled with anger, betrayal, and endless conflict. It turned each relative into a potential enemy, turned the roof into a prison, and turned love into a rope that tightened around their necks until there was no more air. Follow and subscribe to our channel to update the exciting and dramatic developments of the ongoing movie.